quick content warning. For this episode, we will be discussing scenes depicting violence against women and implied sexual assault. Please be mindful of your triggers while listening. Take care of yourself. Step away if you need to. And the sexual assault helpline is there if you need support. Their national number is 1-800-656-4673. Thanks, guys.
No way.
I need you frightened. I need you hopeless.
Welcome to the chaos. This is Reflections of Horror. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Kale, and this is the Run, Sweetheart, Run episode. So, Lisa, tell us the premise of Run, Sweetheart, Run. What are we dealing with here? And before we really get into it, I just want to let everybody know this is your spoiler alert. We will be talking about the entire movie, so if you haven't seen it yet and don't want to be spoiled, I would go watch it and then come back.
Very good premise.
Yeah. Take it away.
Yeah. So, Run, Sweetheart, Run. An Amazon Prime original made by Blumhouse, 2020. Did my research, was still devastated. I still don't think they make physical media of it, which makes me sad. But no,
anyway, you can burn it.
I know.
Burn it onto a disc. That can be done.
So summary for you. I'm again a very basic summary, and then we're going to dive in. So there is our main character Sherry is a pre-law student that is working for a firm, and her boss calls her one night and is basically like, you double booked me, you need to meet with this client now. And she gets roped into this business dinner with this client. She is a single mother, which I think we're going to kind of touch on how that plays a role. And things go sideways quickly, and she is assaulted, and again, check your trigger warnings. She is assaulted by this man, and later on we find out it's not a man, more of a creature type of situation that he chooses to play a game with her and says, basically, I'm going to give you all night to run, and I'm going to hunt you and try to kill you.
Yep. And then this is basically the tale of the night of her escaping.
Yeah.
So off the bat, I love the way that this movie peppers in its foreshadowing, because immediately, I think the first shot of the actual movie as it starts after all the opening credits and stuff are these missing posters of these missing women. From what I could tell from looking at the posters, because they crop up again and again throughout the film, primarily these look like to be like women of color, which makes me think of like the kind of people, like, because to clarify, this man, the bad guy, whose name is all of a sudden escaping me, and I kind of love that. Maybe he doesn't deserve a name.
His name's Ethan, but we can just call him the bad guy.
The monster man.
Yeah.
Is a white man with a ambiguous accent, rich, lives in a big mansion.
Yeah,
there's some interesting things of class going on there, because we're dealing with a single mother who's working as like pre-law and also kind of an assistant to another like white man. But so I found it really interesting of her boss sending her on this date. Like immediately that set my hackles up. Yeah. Not even just knowing that I'm in a horror movie and knowing the premise and everything. Yeah. It's like, what would have been the point of him sending her to this dinner that obviously he was like, you don't even have to talk about law, just take him to dinner.
Yeah.
What is the point of that besides not being like weird and predatory, I feel like?
Yeah. You have already immediately sexualized your young assistant.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we can just start from the beginning. We have the missing posters. We have her kind of getting ready for this date.
So even before the date, so to your point of foreshadowing, so this was a second or third watch for me, probably. Obviously, my first dissecting it. I didn't even catch. So you have your missing posters, and then it goes into, you get kind of like a frame by frame shot of a bunch of different secretaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is like a little bit of like, are all of these women in this web that we uncover? Well, we're trying to go chronologically today and not hop around. So this web that gets uncovered later that has been set up, this rewatch, I was like, oh, are these all the fucking women?
Yeah. See, I was wondering that too, but then they were all answering for different men,
Yeah.
right? But that's not to say that they're not all somehow, like you said, a web, like somehow involved with that, because there were so many, just so many posters and so many women. And then we'll see later when Sharia's gathering evidence, or finding evidence that it's probably goes a lot deeper than even we first see in the movie.
Yeah. But then a big talking point for me is going to be the amount of just tension and dread this movie sustains for like 100 minutes, in my opinion. Like, it is just like the way you said, like, your hackles went up. Like, it is just a continuous peppering of things that as women we experience and we clock and we get nervous about all the time.
Yeah.
And they just run with it.
Yeah.
Like, I like the fact that it's run, sweetheart, run. And they start with it when her boss walks out of the office and goes, thanks, sweetheart.
Yeah.
And then the title card pops up. And I think sweetheart is so perfect.
Yeah.
Because so many of it, we've all encountered a man. Thanks, honey. Thanks, sweetheart.
Yeah, I think that sweetheart is really bad, but honey is really the one that really kind of makes my entire body twitch and just like instant visceral rage.
Yeah.
But I think we all kind of have that. It's just this belittling, infantilizing kind of just nickname that you have no right to call someone else in a professional setting.
Yeah.
And I think that starting off in an office setting was really interesting, because there's just something about an office to me that just screams just awful dystopian hell.
Capitalism.
Yeah, like, you can't. And you know what? I'm sitting there and I'm watching her sitting in the office, and you know what? I'm like thinking, I bet it's really fucking cold in there, because it always is cold in the offices, and that's always controlled by men.
Well, and it's setting this environment of, like, I think another thing is, like, an office setting is an inherently white setting. So, like, you're already, I think, I mean, we talked about it off mic, but it's like, I think it makes this movie so much more powerful that our main character is a Black woman. I think the experience of Black women is even harder and even more difficult. And I mean, this podcast is always going to be talking about our voices not being heard and not being believed. But I think that experience with being Black as well just gets amplified and even worse than what we experience. So we just want to address that I think that part of this makes it so much more powerful as well.
I agree. I think the casting was really on point. First, Ethan's actor, I believe, was in Game of Thrones as like a really horrible human
Interesting.
too. So I saw him pop up on screen, and I'm like, don't like that. not a fan. But just because you get into the way that actors carry, the way that they're cast based on their previous performance, like typecasting maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think casting really had a really important role, and I think that the creators were really kind of thoughtful in the way that they interacted with each other. But we'll get more into that a little bit.
Let's jump into we had already talked about kind of how nasty it feels when she gets that phone call. Can we talk about the cinematography of that scene?
Oh my God, yes, please.
It's perfect because it's shot in the bus and it's so claustrophobic.
It's so
like she's just in a tight space because she's standing in the middle of the bus, so she's not in the seat. And it's for me, it's the beginning of my anxiety that then gets sustained for the entire movie because the call comes in. And I have worked in spaces where I've gotten calls like that, where you're off the clock, you get the phone call, and now your anxiety's sky high because you think that you've messed something up and need to fix it. So we're claustrophobic in space. The call is happening. and there's a creepy man.
There's a creepy man
behind her. And I'm like, oh, I've got stimulus overload. Because, like, her boss is yelling at her in her ear. She's kind of like, and again, we've all been there. Like, she's trying to make sure she's safe while also listening on the phone and trying to figure out how to fix it. And then she kind of tries to move out of the way and moves to a different area of the bus where we get a shot of an older black woman that kind of, like, looks up and kind of acknowledges what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, like, she kind of gets brushed against, like, this creepy guy's gonna do God knows what to her, to where she's then still going, okay, well, yeah, I'll meet with the client, and then moves her way to the front of the bus, has to ding to get off, and I love the iconic, like, flip the bird and get off the bus.
Yep, yeah. A little tiny bit of power there, but yeah, the bus creeps are, that makes me think about Class a little bit, because, like, we got the bus creeps on the bus, like, doing creepy bus man things, right? But then, like, the main villain of the movie is this man who is supposed to be her boss, who's supposed to be trustworthy, who claims he's trustworthy, and then also this other, like, high class, like, very powerful man, and those are the real monsters, right? Those are the, like, literally the real monsters. But yeah, so she gets home, and then we see she has a little infant baby girl, and I think that it is important that she was a mother, but I do sometimes have a problem with women characters who their entire on-screen identity is hinged on the fact that they have a kid and they are a mother, and I think that can be a very harmful thing, because I think that a lot of times their entire character is boiled down to just that. So when I first saw that, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what we're doing. But I think that this film did a really good job of making that not her whole identity. Yeah. And I think it was also a very important kind of, like, signifier, because not only is she a mother, but she's a single mother. And she's just trying her best, and she can't go home because she has to protect her kid, right? So that was one thing that I was like, wasn't sure initially how I felt about it, but after, like, a couple of rewatches through, I think that it was a good choice to have made her, like, a young mother. Yeah. Because I think especially a single mother doesn't get a whole lot of representation on screen either.
That's true. Throughout this, I'm going to bring up a couple little nuggets, if we will, of nods to other horror movies. Yes. So I felt like when she's in the shower and starts her period, a nod to Psycho. Oh, yeah. 100%.
100%.
Blood on the drain. You get the shot of the shower head, the epic shot of the shower head. And I'm like, that's a little bit of Psycho love there. I'm down with that. And for me, I think this little bit is our first kind of like release from that tension of, like, ooh, this is all icky and, like, a lot is going on, because, like, the best friend comes over to babysit the kid, and then, like, it's just kind of this moment of, like, female camaraderie and, like, joking around, and the best friend's trying to get her dressed for a date, and it's like, girl, like, you don't have to be a mother, like, let's put you in something a little bit more attractive type of thing.
Yeah. And I really liked the getting ready for the date scene a lot, because I thought it was really kind of poignant to show how much thought and effort she put into what she was wearing. Because she picks this, like, really cute kind of red dress with, like, puffy sleeves and like cut off puffy sleeves, and, you know, it's like knee length, and she wears a trench coat over it, and she puts a lot of thought into making sure that she looks professional and all this stuff. So, and I think that's really important for what happens later, which we'll get back to. Yep. And I really like the interaction with her and her friend. Yeah. You tell that they're really tight. They're very close. Yeah. And, you know, the friend is kind of joshing her and, like, teasing her, like, yeah, like, go, don't just be a mom, like, go, like, get laid and stuff. But then I think there's this really important part where she hands her pepper spray. Oh, yeah. And she's like, really? And she's like, he may be fine, but he's still a man. And I think this touch was so important, because she's teasing her, and she's like, you know, trying to pump her up,
Yeah.
but still acknowledging the fact that this might not be something that Shuri wants.
Yep.
And respecting that and showing like this protection for her.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I thought it was great. And then I think in my first watch, I was like, oh man, I always ship them with their best friends. I'm like, just date each other. It'll be fine. You guys are cute.
Just stay home, have a girls' night in, and
Yeah.
just let whatever happen happen.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't need to go deal with these guys. Stop.
You would.
But it does make me wonder that unlike Jennifer's body, the pepper spray does not make another appearance.
Yeah, it doesn't come back around.
So it was kind of like, I called it Chekhov's pepper spray. Like, because yeah, this pepper spray is probably going to be used as foreshadowing, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I thought that, I'm not sure if that was a plot hole or maybe it just got lost in the shuffle of the evening, right?
I would say maybe left on the cutting room floor. Maybe
Yeah.
there was a instance of it and then it just got cut.
Maybe. So yeah, we're kind of moving along and we're going into the night. We're going into the date. So I said last time in reference to Jennifer's body that I was getting Twilight vibes.
Okay.
This time, while they're on the date and they're talking and she's like kind of like a socially lower ranked young woman and he's like an obviously rich, powerful white man. I was getting kind of like 50 Shades of Grey vibes almost immediately in the way that it was set up and kind of set up into like this, they did kind of have a little bit of chemistry and she was showing interest in getting along with him. I kind of vibed with it being almost 50 Shades of Grey coded because realistically speaking, Christian Grey would have been a monster, He would have been like realistic, like he's a billionaire, like playboy. And you know what? That doesn't really breed the best kind of like humanitarian gentleman kind of figures. Yeah. So I kind of liked that take on it. And I'm not sure if it was intentional from the creators, but it was something that I kind of put together in my little head. Also, 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fanfic originally, and I just need everybody to know that.
You heard it here. Educate yourself, people.
Yeah. There's a whole rabbit hole.
For me, like again, like just the tension that starts the moment she gets to his door, like, makes my skin crawl. So like, what did you clock how, the beginning before they get to dinner, how, like, I don't remember this the first time I watched it, but how much she corrects him at the house.
I did.
But then is apologetic about it.
I did clock that.
I was like, oh, I hate this.
I hated it too.
So much.
It made me so on edge because I'm like, I had a whole bunch of thing of like literally in all caps in my notes right now. It says correcting him, never correct a man, literally. And then I was like, this guy is such a loser because he's just like he doesn't know anything.
Yeah,
right?
But is trying to flaunt it, and she's intelligent enough to be like, oh, that's actually not what that is.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, also like, that's dangerous. That can be dangerous, and I think that I worry that is like one of the things that like really got him to latch onto her is like her challenging him, right? And then he offers her a gin and tonic, which is really just like a full glass of gin, and I'm like immediately loser, disgusting. Like, come on, at least make a good cocktail. If you're gonna be a fucking creep.
If you're gonna be a bajillionaire with all sorts of
literally
access to anything. The drop of blood on the floor. This was the beginning of my obsession with this movie because one, and we all heard it in the first episode, my hate for the period, the role of the period in horror.
Yes.
But like, this was the first movie where I was like, I have watched a gajillion horror movies at this point. I have put myself in every scenario. Would I get away from Michael? Would I get away from Jason? Would I get away from Freddy? I have never thought about you are running for your life and bleeding down your legs simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I was like, ain't that some fucking shit? Because that is how it would go for me. I would be soaked through trying to fight for my life.
Oh my God.
So
that's the worst.
I think this was the first moment where it's like you're in this house and for me, I don't know how you felt about it, but the drop of blood she immediately is like, oh, I'm bleeding. Like, I need to go to the bathroom. But it's like, is that a drop of someone else's blood?
Yeah. Yeah. And
that she, like, if you're not on your period and you go to a man's house and you see a drop of blood on the floor, you're probably going,
oh, I need to leave immediately. Goodbye.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna call myself a lift.
Yeah.
But instead, she immediately goes, "Oh, this is embarrassing for me. I have to fix this."
She like internalizes that and takes it upon herself to fix. And then also like the unfamiliarity of being in a bathroom that you don't know.
Yep.
In a man's bathroom in particular, because he has the open trash can, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yep.
Yeah, I watched that and it was like, yeah, I got that wave of tension and just like that kind of inherent to me, like that embarrassment of just like, fuck, man, like this sucks.
To your foreshadowing, I did not remember this my first watch through. She wraps the tampon up and puts it in her purse.
Oh man, okay, yes, you're right.
And we find out here, we'll probably discuss it here in a couple minutes, he can smell her blood.
Yes.
I did not remember that from the first watch through, but watching it the second time, I was like, don't put it in there. Just put it in the trash.
But she doesn't have her purse. She doesn't have anything. So she's not carrying that with her.
True.
Which is good, because there's a whole, so he's very drawn to the smell of her blood, right? And she's like bleeding. But okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We're trying to go chronologically this time.
Trying. So
dinner.
I have a little, dinner. I have, up until this point, we've kind of been collecting little red flags, but she still seems to be having like a decent time with him. And then we get this kind of a jump scare.
Our first jump scare, no doubt.
Yeah. And maybe kind of the only like jump scare that you get. But they're in this nice restaurant, they're having a conversation, and then a dog comes out and is just like barking at him. Yeah. And he flips his lid. He gets up and he's like, control your dog. Yeah. And has this outburst. And that, again, is when the dread and the tension starts coming back for me a lot, because I think that it is definitely a lived experience for a lot of women to have that dreaded stillness when a man has a loud outburst around you. Yep. And then, he sits back down, he tries to cover it with the story. It was like, oh, I was bitten by a dog when I was a kid. I had 43 stitches. And I'm like, boo-hoo, your trauma. Like, it's a dog.
Go to the therapy.
Yeah.
I love the role of the dog, though. Because
me too.
I am a firm believer dogs will catch a vibe. And if a dog does not fucking like somebody, I'm waving the red flag, because dogs are just so loving. So I think if a dog's gonna pop off at you, it's a sign that you are a shitty human.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's a lot to the just the role of the dog in this movie that we'll see again later. I agree. I was like, when the dog came at him, I was like, nope, not for me. Yep. Very, very bad. But so they're kind of coming back, settling down, and then they go roller skating for some reason. I thought that was it. I think like cinematography wise, I think it was a really cool scene, but it was also like, they're roller skating. What are we doing?
I feel like it was just truly a bit of a release. Yeah. Because like I said, there's so much tension in this movie. Yeah. And I think that was just like, let's just release this to get out of, and again, kind of how it was shot. Dinner is like relatively dark, and then they get to this roller rink,
very funky,
and there's balloons, and they're being silly. And what do you think of this soundtrack, by the way?
Oh my god, the soundtrack rocks.
Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah, every single time a new song would come on, I'd be like, putting that on the playlist. Like, it's so good. And I think soundtrack is so important to being able to set the atmosphere and the tone of not just the entire film, but also for the scene in particular. There's a lot of power there. Yeah. I am a big fan of the soundtrack.
So they get back to the house. How did you feel about the interaction from the car and outside the door?
So there was a lot of kind of still that tension and kind of like a going back and forth to her, because he wants her to come inside for another drink, and she's like, I have to get back to my babysitter, I have to get up really early in the morning, and she's kind of going back and forth. And but I was still kind of catching this vibe that it's like she there was still this kind of chemistry with him that
Yeah.
she was feeling. And maybe I read that wrong, but I think that she walked into the house. Well, I don't know. Because I now that I'm kind of thinking on it, it might have been a mix between like kind of like she was kind of interested in him still, and then maybe he definitely was guilting her into it once they were out of the car.
Oh, 100%.
Once they were out of the car and they were going for it, but I think there was still like, oh, maybe. And then and then okay, so let me just read my notes here. I said she's obviously attracted to him, but that doesn't matter. The way that it can still go south, the way they can still take advantage, the way they can still make it coercive. Her indecision is so understandable. And then I put in all caps, is he pouting? Live notes, you know. So I think that was also really well done, and like this indecision of like, should I, shouldn't I, and then it not being like fully coercive.
Yeah.
But then it's still ending in a way that it didn't have to be for him to still be terrible.
Ugh,
you know,
it like I feel like my anxiety is like raising just
thinking about it.
Like it again, it's like one of those moments we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
You are on a date with somebody and the night has kind of gone roller coaster, up down,
Mm-hmm.
moments of like, that's not good, and then moments of like, oh, we're at the roller rink having a great time. And like, you have this internal dialogue, and I feel like women especially are so intuitive, and if we would just actually fucking listen to ourselves, you might be able to avoid these shitty men. But even then, like, I mean, even I'm tiptoeing this line of victim blaming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, but it plays into this big circle of like, you show that moment because that no doubt will be a moment for her where she's going to think back and go, I shouldn't have fucking done this. And she's going to put it on herself instead of just being like, bitch, he's a monster. And I stood no chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just want to go back to that point where you can still walk willingly and with like enthusiastic consent into a situation and it still go south.
Yeah.
And it still be taken too far.
Yeah.
Or taken in a violent way by this person. And even if you're walking into that situation with this like this consent for something and it can still go wrong, that's still like not your fault, because it's still the choices of the literal monster to be monstrous. So I think playing in and like just having this conversation and just like kind of playing into the way that indecision that you see, that back and forth, that kind of like the instinct, and then also like the, oh, well, maybe is, I think that's very realistic. And I think that's very kind of like, a lived experience that a lot of women have had.
The point you just made was so good. I just had the thought of like, I wonder how much more powerful this ride for us would have been had, from the moment she arrived at his house to the point where she goes back and enters the house again after the date, if nothing had gone wrong.
Yeah.
So if they had shot it in a manner of, he's a super sweet guy, he opens the doors, he made her a nice drink, maybe complimented her and was like, wow, you're really intelligent, like, look at me bumbling around, no outbursts, and then maybe that scene where when they enter the house and he goes,
and then you just get that, because you already get that wash of just dread of knowing what's coming. I think you're right. I think that would have made it like significantly more powerful, because you have this like kind of this like hope, this kind of something, and then but you know what you're watching, right? So then when it comes to that point,
just a random thought in my brain.
It's a good thought. yeah, but we need to talk about that scene about when he stops the camera.
Yeah.
Because I think it's great. I think it's brilliant. I think it's done so well. So just to summarize, they're having this kind of back and forth in front of the house of her coming in for one last drink, and then she agrees and she goes in, and the camera's following, and then he turns to the camera and he does that. He holds up his hand and is like, nope, you're not coming in. And then the door closes, and then this sound builds of this struggle, this
clearly
violence.
Clearly violence is happening behind this closed door.
Mm-hmm. But and just the way that it's shot and the way that the sound mixing goes, it's not hard to visualize kind of what's happening. And we don't even need to see that, because we've seen that scene so many times before in so many different forms of media.
Yeah.
For all of history.
You know, and again, only clocked it on this rewatch. The shot on the door is still painfully long.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, we have discussed I Spit on Your Grave and the awful assault scene that is far too long and completely unnecessary. And I was like, oh, they're still taking the same mechanism of dread, but now you're relying on auditory senses.
On your imagination, which, is something that a lot of horror movies use in order to instill dread, and that, like, we're not going to show you this monster, we're not going to show you the thing that you should be afraid of, we're going to let your imagination do that for you. I think that's a brilliant move, and then it's a motif that we'll see a couple times later that we'll get into, of just like not showing the explicit violence, but leaving it to kind of like the imagination of what's happening.
And again, the beauty of female creators, written and directed by a woman that found no need to visually show you the abuse of a woman. It's not needed.
Yeah.
Because I still had an anxiety attack for 100 minutes watching this movie.
Yeah. It's not
watching
needed.
Very little visual violence on this woman.
Yeah. And it, just really powerful decision. So,
door swings open.
Door swings open. She comes out, mascara down her face, dress is ripped. She is in visual, awful distress. And you get this punch over the screen of, in all caps, red, bold font, run.
Thoughts on that? Talk to me, Kale.
Spectacular.
Talk to me.
That's so good, because it's like that punch that you get when you're in a situation, you get fight or flight response, and you just inside you're just screaming run, right? And that is so good. And I think and this is a motif that will come up a couple times later. I think it's just it's a punch. It's a powerful visual punch. And I think that it is a really good decision on the cinematography kind of part of it. And then she runs. She fucking runs. And she runs also what I at first I loved it and then I hated it. She's running with no shoes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God you're not having this poor woman be running around in heels in the middle of the night.
I again would argue female creator knows
absolutely.
It. Like, if I'm trying to run for my life, I'm kicking my fucking heels off. You are not seeing me do a sprint down the road in the middle of the night in heels.
No, never, absolutely not. And that is such a motif that you see in everything. And that, you know what, in the first episode we were talking about pet peeves. Absolutely one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, there's no way. I know one woman who is like a superhuman, one other friend of mine who can run in heels and does it amazingly, but that is not a universal skill.
For me, I'm like, if you're not a drag queen, I don't think you can run successfully in heels.
Absolutely. And we never do see her in heels, shoes. Even when she's dressed up for the night, she's not wearing heels, and I think that's very intentional.
Yeah.
So that brings us to kind of act 2, the first run, we're running for our lives.
Yeah. So as we work our way through this, I think a couple powerful shots at night. So she's trying to find somebody to help her. And I think the first door she knocks on, doesn't the guy like yell back, like, get out of here, I have a gun or something, like, is basically like, get off my porch, which I'm like, wonderful.
Yeah.
And then she rounds the corner at one point, is again yelling nonstop, looks up, the Karen in the window.
The Karen in the window.
The white woman in the window that clearly sees her. She's yelling to her, turns the light off.
Turns her back, and it's like that dismissal and that, again, that dread of like, because you see in other horror movies of like someone running, screaming for help, and there's just no one around.
Yeah.
But to be completely rejected and to completely ignored.
An even worse feeling.
Yeah. And it reminds me of this, like, this thing that I think it popped up in, like, you know, culture or whatever when I was, like, in high school, of, like, this thing of, like, if you need help, if you're running, you scream fire, you don't scream rape.
Yep.
Because people will come for fire. Yep. They won't call for that.
Yep.
And that was really powerful. So yeah, we have the white woman turning away, and she's running through these dark streets, and it's very liminal, and she's running barefoot and just like begging for help.
Yeah.
And then we get the silhouette of him.
Yeah, I was about to say, another nugget for me, I felt like when we get the shot down the alley and you see him in the distance, very Michael Myers for me. Very, I'm watching you from a distance, but I am still stalking you, and I am still going to get you. I'm still coming for you. You are not safe.
So then she continues to run, and she comes into something of civilization. There's other people around in the street. She runs up to these two, again, white women, shivering, barefoot, without a phone, without a purse, without anything, and asks if she can use their phone. And their immediate distrust and like just like kind of like distance that they put between themselves and her. And she's like, oh, I'll call for you. What's your because she's like, I just need to call my babysitter. And she's like, what's your babysitter's number? And she doesn't know, because nobody remembers phone numbers anymore.
And I thought of you talking about cell phones though in our last episode. I was like, that's so true though, because this is allowed to be part of the plot because we all live with cell phones, and we all remember probably 2 cell phone numbers, and outside of that, it's not memorized. It's just in my phone.
Yeah. I know my number and my mom's number, and that's it.
100%.
Yeah, so again, it's like that. I'm glad you brought that up, that I had talked about cell phones before, because I think that it is like the way that we use cell phones now is so different than it was even 10 years ago. And then so they call the cops.
So before we get there, can I do my little nugget?
Yes, another nugget, please.
So this one was a big one for me. And again, I don't know why. I guess because I was dissecting. So I was really watching, really looking for what was on screen. So the women at the matinee is showing Knife in the Water. I don't know what this movie is. I Googled it. It's Roman Polanski's first film. If you may or may not know, Roman Polanski has created several movies, but is horrifically problematic. 15 years after the creation of that movie, he was convicted of sexual assault of a minor, drugging, raping, all of the things of a child. So I'm like, that's pretty heavy. If, like, is that nugget in there to show how problematic these 2 white women are, that they're spending their Friday evening seeing a Roman Polanski film?
Yeah, or... and also set, as we established, set in this time.
Yeah.
Knowing.
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because I want to say that film is 70s, maybe even earlier than that. It's a very old film, so it's like we would have known what that situation is. So I just found that nugget very interesting on this watch.
That was a really good catch, because that's something that I did not catch.
So cops are called. Which things always get so much better when we call the white cops to show up and help a black woman.
Just to kind of
cue sarcasm for those of you who may not know me at home.
Yeah. So I'm going to give another little note reading for me. Oh no, calling the cops feels like a bad idea. Re-victimization. And then, in all caps, question mark, explanation point, arrested.
Yeah.
So,
public intoxication. She gets arrested.
Yeah, she gets arrested. And again, ripped dress, barefoot, visible distress. She is arrested. She is re-victimized. She has to go through. She has to get her mugshot done. Yeah. And then they put her in a cell. And on the way to the cell, she asks the officer, and she's like, I need a tampon.
Yeah.
And his visible disgust when she asked that, I think, is so poignant. Yeah. And just made me see a little bit of red. I'm like, there's
like the tension and the dread.
Yeah.
Like I've been saying, like
Again.
we're still carrying this, and you're just like, oh, for fuck's sake, this girl cannot catch a break to save her life.
Yeah, and she literally can't. So she's put in a cell, and there is another woman there who's very kind of like sex worker coded.
Yeah.
I think that's the assumption that we're meant to be drawn on, and they're sitting there and they're having like kind of a moment of, she's like, well, who did this to you, kind of thing. And she shares the fact that he made her a shitty, she's like, his gin and tonic sucked anyway. And then the other woman is like, what?
Yeah. And
it turns out that this woman's friend had disappeared.
Yeah.
After telling her the exact same thing, the same kind of thing. So again, this sex worker person is also another white woman, but I think that their because I was just kind of tracking the way she interacts with other women and other and just other characters, and I think the way that race kind of plays into this is very poignant. But this is another white woman who gives her some very helpful advice, but then also is like, get me out of this cell. This bitch is trying to kill me, right? So it's this kind of like not quite solidarity at first.
Yeah.
And then this pulling away from it of, I need to protect myself. And just that kind of that divide. Yeah. You know, I thought was really interesting.
I thought, like, again, it was a very visceral reaction for me, because I think in circles of women, there it is a common experience for someone to go, this happened with me, and describe the experience, and someone go, like, I've heard this story, so and so had that experience, I've had that experience, whatever. And I think, to your point, I think it's so unfortunate that a lot of just womanhood is this, because she goes, you need to contact the first lady, so gives her that piece of advice of, here's where you need to go to be safe, and then she literally goes, it's nothing against you, sorry, and then she turns and goes, she's trying to kill me, get me out of the cell. So it was like this little bit of, look, you're on your own, here's the bit of advice that I have, but I need to get the fuck away from you.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of like it's like how, especially what you see with like white feminism, it's feminism to a point. Yeah. And then if you're not in that circle, you're going to get left behind, you know? And I think that was a really interesting kind of way to depict that. Yeah. So she gets out of the cell, and then a visitor comes.
They say, you have a visitor. And lo and behold, it is Ethan.
It's Ethan. And, and just before that, she told, so the street, the sex worker woman, tells her, she's like, this man controls other men. Yeah. Oh. And then we get the visitor with this in mind. And, you know, he walks in, and Cherie is screaming. She's like, this is the man who did this to me. Get me out of here. And the cop closes him in with her, and walks off. And I have a question that I'm really interested in hearing your opinion. Does he really control other men supernaturally, or does he just control them in the fact that he is a white man with money?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Again, to these movies we're watching that have supernatural elements, I literally did not even for a second think supernatural.
Oh, really?
I just went to white man billionaire.
Yeah, okay.
That is immediately where I went.
Okay.
Especially like, because he's in with this law firm. So is he a lawyer? Is he a high-powered man that needs lawyers?
He's a client.
Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah, I immediately went to crooked cops, bought off, has an inner circle that lets him navigate and do as he please.
Yeah, okay. Because I think that there's a scene later that made me think it was kind of supernatural, but I think it is more poignant that it's just because he's a man who controls other men because he has a lot of money. And because he's like just a high society kind of guy.
When he walks in, he says, "Hello, sweetheart."
Ugh. Disgusting.
God. And I think, oh God, I don't know if it's the cold brew I drank today, but like my anxiety is getting up just thinking about this movie some more. I really liked, because again, we talk about cinematography and imagery, and are we using motifs or are we using analogy? Like, how are we depicting this?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact he flat out says, "No one is going to believe you because no one cares." Yeah, like to
her face,
have that monster just verbally, flat out say that. Because we all know that. We all know the experience of a woman is when we show up and say, "This happened to us." No one believes us because no one really gives a shit because we're not a white man.
Yeah.
Like, we know that, but to have him just flat out say it,
explicitly, like literally saying the quiet part out loud. I think that's, there's a disgusting brazenness about that.
Yeah.
And then he also makes a comment on her dress that she had spent so much time trying to put together and think about. And he was like, "You walked into the house with your fuck me dress," and it's like,
calls her a cock tease.
That is so infuriating, because it comes to the whole motif of like what was she wearing and all this stuff, and she put so much thought into making sure it wouldn't be construed that way, and that just goes back into the whole idea of like, no matter what happens, no matter what you do, bad people are going to make bad choices to harm you. You know, and it's not, and that really got to me, because I just remember her like thinking, because when she was putting so much thought into her dress, I'm like, this is going to go badly no matter what you're wearing, it's going to go bad. And then, you know, he kind of questions her, like what she was looking for, and she's like, "I wanted to meet someone nice." And that just kind of like goes back to this idea that there was interest, there was chemistry, and he still did her harm, still blamed her for it, and blamed her for the harm that he inflicted on her. Really messed up, like really kind of like really well done, but it's like the more I think about it, the more that it really kind of goes into these cycles. Like, just for full disclosure, I used to work as an advocate for victims of sexual assault, and I was in police interviews, and I heard the stories, and then I was sat in on trials, and it's like the narratives that are spun against the victim is crazy. It's so crazy, and it's just horrific. Like, that's horror. You know, that's horror, and it's horror in a way that it's being done to show how it is still horrific, not just the act, but the aftermath is horrific. So, she gets out of jail.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So they have the interaction. I think it's a really, again, just building the dread when they're having that interaction in the cell, and she has gotten up and kind of backed into the corner, and he quickly moves down the bench. I thought that was really well acted on his part, because it's that aggression, but I'm not laying hands on you. But as a woman, you're still backed into a corner and horrifically uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And he basically just says, "We're going to play a game," which Kale pointed out for my little nuggets. A little Saul-coded.
We're going to play a game.
And just explains, look, the way we do this. And I think he touches on, "You really impressed me because you really put up a fight, blah, blah, blah." And then goes,
like in the beginning when she challenged him. Right?
So he then just explains, well, the way this works is you're going to run, and you're going to run all night, and I'm going to hunt you all night. And if you can make it to sunrise, I'll let you live. So then she gets let out of jail.
She is running again, and she runs not home because she knows she can't run home because she has a child there.
A little bit of the cinematography before.
Yeah.
So when she gets out, she's in an area with some homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
The shot of she's closest to the camera, and then we have the homeless man walking in the background, and they're kind of in sync.
Yeah.
Like gives me goosebumps to think about, because it is that experience of a woman walking at night
Mm-hmm.
and clocking a man by you and thinking he's matching your movement or he's following me or whatever, and then it just so happens he's just a homeless dude crossing the street into the night, and then she turns around and another guy's walking at her, maybe a little bit of a jump scare, but and again he's not after her, he's just walking by, so it's like this,
it's just the tension does not let up at all. It just still is going like the whole time. It's so
it's but
also through this whole thing she still doesn't have shoes. No, the cops didn't give her any shoes.
And still doesn't have a fucking tampon.
Yeah. No tampon, no shoes. And so she's wandering around in what looks kind of very like Skid Row coated.
Yeah.
Barefoot.
Yeah.
Dear God. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that she's barefoot until we get to that part. And I'm like, please, someone give this woman some shoes. Oh my God. Please, something. So stressful.
Yeah. So she knows she can't go home. So she goes to her boss's house.
Mm-hmm. She sure is.
Would that have been your choice?
No. Can't say it would have been my choice. I think that maybe it says something to like the kind of like connections and stuff that she has.
True.
Maybe she doesn't have a lot. I mean, she has her friend who's babysitting her child.
Yeah.
Not like any family or anything. So maybe she literally doesn't have anyone to go to. And she's kind of going to this place that she knows that this is like a powerful person.
Yeah.
This is a powerful person who also sent her to Ethan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean I think maybe given their history, it made sense that he had helped her out before.
Okay.
I think.
But stops a cab, gets in a cab, and goes to the boss's house. And we were discussing this about, we see throughout the movie, really the only men that help her in any way are men of color. Mm-hmm. So
the only people who help her in any way really at all
are people of color.
Or other people of color.
Yeah.
There's
which again, I think that's powerful.
It's powerful and poignant.
Yeah, that is shot that way for a reason, because that is a real fucking experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she basically goes like, I have no money, I have nothing I can give you, but I really need to go to my boss's house. This is the address. And he even kind of alludes to, I've picked other girls up that look like you.
And she's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Look like me. And it's like, look like you, like hurt and crying and upset and stuff. And it's like, so again, that kind of like shows this expanse of like what is going on in this world. Because like off the bat with the missing posters in the very beginning, I think that is just a real powerful shot of like, oh, this is a world where it is dangerous to be a woman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we get to the boss's house. The boss's penthouse, I will say, because he is a rich white man. The first thing I clock is she's still apologizing.
Oh, I think I missed that.
She, like, one of the first things she says when she walks into his apartment is like, I'm really sorry, I know it's your anniversary.
Oh, okay, yeah, I do remember that part now, yeah. And still apologizing, even though she's been through all this trauma.
Do you understand what I would do to that man if I showed up? I would be like, you fucking piece of shit, and I would probably assault him.
Oh, yeah, no, word,
kick in the door. I'm bashing heads. Like, but God love her. She's still apologetic, and
because I don't think at this point she doesn't know that he is actually also fucking evil.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. We don't know yet, but we're getting very close.
So go ahead.
So brings her in. he starts yelling for his wife.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that whole interaction of he's trying to talk to Cherie on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
The wife is in the kitchen making tea. What did you think of that dynamic in that shot?
It was very uncomfortable. It
Yeah.
was very uncomfortable because there was this tension with the wife there of just this automatic kind of like tension between her and Cherie, I think, of like from the wife's side. I gathered of that she's there. At least that's what I first thought. I was like, how is the wife going to feel about this younger woman being in her home and stuff, right? Because, you know, in the way that a lot of cinema and media does this, it's this pitting of women against each other.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my brain went immediately. But then also it was like this dread building,
Yeah.
this kind of nervousness and fear on the wife's part.
Yeah.
I felt.
I was going to say, that's interesting to hear you say that because... So I don't remember exactly what he says because he's just a bumbling idiot and he's basically trying to just get information out of her, it kind of feels like, where like also kind of passively placing blame. Like it's one of those gross conversations. So I don't even remember. I probably blacked it out. But she's in the kitchen and he's like yelling at her like, get us some tea, and then like turns to Cherie and is like, sorry, she's probably already taken her Ambien. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Right.
But something happens where he says something and she chops the lemon really hard. And for me, the dynamic was like, for me, in her facial expressions and the way she acts in the background during the conversation between the husband and Cherie, I'm like, she knows something.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Whether she has had a young woman show up like this before.
Yeah.
And knows what's happening. Or whatever it is.
Or she knows more.
Yeah.
So it took me another couple scenes for me to be able to be like, oh, she knows.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you're on Beyonce conspiracy TikTok right now. Well, it's a whole thing, and
Hit me with it. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Well, it's just there's a song by J. Cole or something that plays, and it's like she knows, and I know she knows. And then when Cherie is later, after Cherie showers and stuff, and she goes and she's in his office and she's looking at the computer and stuff, and then the wife comes in.
Yeah,
that song immediately popped into my head, and I was just like, she knows. She knows.
I know she knows. That's true.
Yeah. But she does know.
Yeah.
She knows. And I think that is really interesting. Her role is really interesting and still awful because she's still complicit in the death of, as we learn, many, many, many women.
So essentially, she gets showered, she goes into his office and kind of just like starts clicking around. First, she searches on the Mac, like just Ethan, whatever his last name.
Yeah.
Gets some documents, whatever. Then goes into the calendar and sees like the calendar blurb for her date is in the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, that's suspect because if this came out of me double booking you, why is this in here?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's just written as like Ethan with Cherie. So she searches in the calendar Ethan with in parentheses.
It's actually not. It's Ethan in all caps, tithe with name. So tithe is money that is taken from patrons and given to the church as a tax. And every single one of the women that show up in the calendar is tagged with Ethan tithe with like Jessica or Tasha or something like that.
I thought it was his last fucking name.
No,
you are so right.
Because she searches his last name and nothing comes up. But when she's searching tithe, as in this tax given to a church, so it's like it gets into, we'll learn later, it gets kind of very biblical and very weird. So this is another one of the clues that's kind of peppered in there.
You.
Yeah,
that's good. I completely missed that.
Yeah, it was that kind of blew my mind because I'm like, so we're tying the stuff in.
I'm not gonna make it through this episode the deeper we dig. I'm just so anxious. Oh, I hate this movie. Is just
It's a lot.
so many levels of dread.
Yeah, it really is. So many levels of dread. And
so she sees this.
yes.
And I think the wife walks in, so she slams the laptop.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the wife's delivery of the line, "He can smell you. Your blood has a very powerful scent." To me, that's equated, like, the level of, like, oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
That is just as creepy. Like, I would equate that to in The Strangers when they're like, "Why are you doing this?" And she's like, "Because you were home." Like, that, it's that same wavelength for me. When she said that, I was like, again, and I'm obsessed with this movie because like I was telling Kale off mic, this is such an original idea to me that I had never seen in a horror movie.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is incredible. And I think when she said that was the moment where I was like, pause the fucking movie. I gotta Google this. This had to be created by a woman. Had to be.
Oh, okay.
Had to be, because you are on your period. Yep. You are running from a monster that literally can smell your blood.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it's like, that's, and it's also, it's just that dread again of like having this figure who knows and who is only kind of giving this little tidbit of information, but not really doing anything to help or save you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, that dread is just like, oh, fuck. So then the boss comes in and he's like, "What's going on here?" And the wife is like, "Oh, I was just giving Cherie some new clothes." Also,
the nightgown.
What the fuck was that nightgown? Oh my god, I saw that, and you know, I have some issues with clothes. I have some sensory things, and I'm looking at that thing, and I'm like, I would cut all my skin off if I had to wear that. Oh my god! And also,
you would just lay down on the road and be like, "Just take me. I can't even do this.
I can't even do." And it's not even because I give up. It's just because why this dress? And it's a dress. It's a nightgown, and also still no shoes. God. So the husband comes in and is like, "What's going on here?" And then he looks at Cherie and he's like, "I just need you to trust me." And then we get the second on-screen big bold red run.
Yep.
Brilliant. Amazing. That was my favorite run because having that said to you, "I just need you to trust me," when you are obviously in distress and freaking out and like all this other stuff is happening and you are obviously not trustworthy, that run, that fight or flight, that thing, that bright red thing that pops into your own brain when you're in a situation like that, just flawless, perfect. I think it's great. Yeah. And that kind of breaks it down into this the third act.
So when she starts running, I think it's this one. I honestly don't remember. I think it's this one. She rounds the corner of a street. We're getting like a wide frame. Did you clock that it says safe along the top part of the wall?
I didn't.
It's because it's dimmed. It's not as bold as the run.
Yeah.
But it literally says safe as she rounds one of the corners and runs up one of the streets.
I didn't catch that one. There is one later that I did catch that I think was really interesting.
So she gets on the bus.
Oh, she gets on the bus.
Yes.
The bus driver is my favorite.
Because the boss is following her at this point. He runs after her.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Yep. He runs after her. She gets on the bus. The bus is completely empty except for the driver, who is another black woman. And this person, I think, is one of my favorite character because she's the only character that really I felt very genuine, like, you are in trouble. I see that. I see you. Use my phone. Like, here you go. How can I help? Where can I take you? How can I help? Where can I take you? What can I do for you? Because I see your distress. You don't even need to articulate or explain to me what's going on in order for me to help you. Yeah. And again, interesting what they're doing there with gender and with race, and that this is a black woman who's doing this and seeing her on this kind of very genuine level. Yeah. Very intentional. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the bus then drops her off at some version of like a deli mart, like whatever. Yeah. I found this to be a little devastating. So early in the movie, when she is on the date with the boy, to your point of a lot of foreshadowing as we go throughout, they get in a conversation. I think he like gives her a compliment of some point about like I don't know, like good women do XYZ. And her response was like, oh, my mom always said it had to do with the type of watch you wear. So she kind of talks about like the importance of like wearing a nice watch.
Okay.
She goes into this deli mart and is like, I need tampons. I don't have anything to give you. Here's a watch you can pawn for however much money.
$50, she said.
And I'm just like, it just took me to that place of like, all of us are out here paying an arm and a leg for sanitary napkins, tampons, whatever you use. It's not up to me if I bleed once a month. Guess what? I have to pay to deal with it.
Yeah. So
it was just like that moment of like, you are in so much distress. You are just trying to survive. I just need a fucking tampon because I am covered in my own blood. And
there's a blood-sniffing monster after me right now. Like, please, give me a break.
This poor woman has to pawn a watch to get her hands on a box of tampons.
We love capitalism.
Makes me want to burn this place down.
Same.
So she gets her box of tampons. She goes around back to the bathroom.
Yes.
Another shot of
blood on the ground.
Yeah, blood on the ground, blood down the legs. We're getting a lot of that. And then we get a pounding on the door.
Yep.
I think the way it's shot, for me, my first instinct was not like, oh, that's him. Was that your response, or what was your response in that moment?
So when the first pounding happened, I was like, okay, someone's at the door, and it was when the second knocking came, I was like, oh, she's fucked. Like, she's in trouble right now.
And she kind of clocks that because she does the old, like, somebody's in here, and then it goes dead silent, and then she kind of takes a look at the floor and goes, fuck. Yeah. He has found me.
Yeah, he found me. I'm bleeding. My blood is there. But then it goes quiet, and she, again, still barefoot in this bathroom behind this gas station.
Yeah, in a skeezy alley. Yeah.
God, she's gonna step on a needle. She's gonna it's just so stressful. They just really pile on the stress in this movie. So she comes out, and then there's Monster Boy. Yeah. Just on the other side of the door waiting for her. Yeah. And then again, he attacks her, and then again we get this moment of, he's dragging her by her hair. Yeah. And we do get that kind of on-screen violence of her, which I think made it more striking of just watching her being dragged across this like dirty, wet ground. Yeah. And then thrown up against a dumpster. And then we have another moment where he turns to the camera and is like, and then pans it, and you pan it over to like a homeless lady who's sitting there and listening. Again, we're listening to this impact. Yeah. And you're watching this woman who's sitting there who has no agency of her own because she has no power and just sitting there cringing, listening to it. She's like half trying to like turn away, but she's kind of in like a little bit of like a homeless encampment, if you will, I guess. Yeah. So her home, if you will, and she's like, well, this is where I always am. And again, kind of playing on a little bit of that, like, I think she's a woman because she's really covered up. So you don't it's not very, very clear, but it's like that concept of like, this is a homeless woman. Who is she to get in the middle of this? Because she's probably going to get assaulted as well. So it's just that awful experience of women of like, I see this abuse. Yeah. If I get in, I am definitely in danger as well. Yeah. What do I even do here? It's like it's different than the wife who has some agency, some power and stuff in order to be able to step in and stop it, report her husband, do something, do literally something. Yeah. And versus this other person who has no power, no ability to do anything to stop anything. And just seeing that and that powerlessness of the situation, again, very well done, very stressful, very dreadful. Yeah. But again, we're not seeing this assault on her visibly.
Yep.
which I think is a really interesting choice.
Yeah. That we love.
Yeah, I do love, because again, it's giving, it's laying on your imagination.
Yeah.
And like what's happening.
Yeah. And then we hear a gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, you're like, oh, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then we cut back and we see that the convenience store worker, a man of color, has come out and has a shotgun and essentially has just popped it into the air to be like, you need to get your hands off of her.
Yes. And then Ethan turns to him and then he runs off. And again, he runs off in such a kind of weird way.
Yeah.
That's when I was kind of thinking, like, oh, can he actually supernaturally control men? That's why I kind of had a bit of a question in my mind about it, because like this man is armed and he is ready to protect her. And then he just kind of, he flees.
It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it does. But, I also kind of like it the other way, too. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
And then in that moment, when he turns to the convenience store guy, she clocks him upside the head and just gets her enough time to start running again.
Yep.
So.
Okay. So, she gets away and, then we meet the ex-boyfriend.
I think Trey.
I think
he's an absolute dickhead.
Yes. We are not the biggest fan of Trey. He does suck.
Yeah.
A lot.
But the assumption here is she calls the ex-boyfriend with the phone of the bus driver.
Yes.
And if I had to guess, it is probably one of those instances like we were talking about. Whose phone number do you know?
Right. Yeah.
You're the father of your child, probably going to be one of like the 2 to 3 numbers that you have memorized.
Exactly.
So, I'm going to let you take this scene, because this scene in the car, I'm like, literally in my notes, it says the ex-boyfriend is a fucking dickhead. Yeah. I just can't stand him.
He is a fucking dickhead. She gets in the car and he immediately is like questioning her. He's being a little bit aggressive and he's,
I think the first thing he says is like, have you been drinking?
Yeah.
Yep.
Again, she's bloody in a nightgown that's not hers and barefoot. Like maybe give her a little bit of like, oh my God, are you okay? What's going on? What's happening?
Read the room, my guy.
Yeah, he does not give her any kind of understanding at all until maybe a little bit later. But so he goes, they're in the car and they're getting into an argument and stuff, and it goes back to like the past, but like she's still, it's this motif in horror movies where it's like this woman is in visible distress and she's not being listened to. She's being told to relax over and over and over again. And it's just infuriating. It's infuriating. And
literally in my notes, I wrote, to be that deep into the experience of the night and then be stuck in a car being lectured by another man.
Yes, because
I'm with you. I'm opening the door. I'm just laying down. Just take me. Because I would rather be dead than have this experience with someone from my past.
Absolutely. And he's sitting there and he is blaming her. It's subtle victim blaming.
1,000%. 1,000%.
Yes, it's 1,000% victim blaming, but it is subtle.
Yeah.
It is not him explicitly being like, well, what did you do kind of thing. But it's implied, which I think is more realistic.
Yeah.
Because it is the underhanded comments. It is those small implications of the comments that are like, that cut the deepest, because you know where it's coming, and it's like, we'll come out and say it kind of thing, right?
Yeah. But all the while this is happening, she's clocking out the window looking for the monster.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, again, it's like a little bit of the stimulus overload is like, you can hear him. I think they dull his audio at one point, so it's like he almost like hits like a little bit of like a white noise almost.
Yeah.
While she's looking into the darkness, it like most of them end up being like homeless people or just figures, but it's like
still like
she can't catch a break. Just let her relax. Give her shoes. Give her food. Give the girl a fucking tampon and just
give her a gun.
Yeah. Just come on.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. But we do kind of get this moment of relief in a really interesting way. So the backstory here is that Trey, I guess, is dating Cherie's former best friend,
Yep.
and there was like some messiness that went on there, and so they're going, and Trey takes her back to her house because she's asking, she's like, do you still have a gun at your house?
Yeah.
And he's like, do I still have a gun? I'm a black man in America,
Yeah.
of course I have a gun. Which great part,
Yeah.
just to put in there.
Yeah.
And so they go back to Trey's house, and then he is like stopping her from going in immediately. He's like, well, let me go warn Dawn that you're here. And
Yeah.
Dawn is the former best friend, current partner of Trey. So there's this like underlying tension between Cherie and Dawn, who is another woman of color. And then she comes out, and Dawn immediately sees Cherie and immediately is just like, what happened? Who did this to you? It's this like kind of almost instant solidarity and caring that just overshadows all of the bullshit from their past that I was just like enthralled by. I'm
Finally.
like, thank
Finally.
God someone is, yeah.
But I think even the way they shot that scene is perfect, because they're at the front door and Cherie's facing the door, and as Dawn comes out, she opens the door and like is turning to basically yell at Trey. And it starts with a little bit of like, what the fuck is she doing here? What the fuck do you mean? And then as she turns in the doorway and sees her, it's immediately like,
Yeah.
wait, what the fuck happened? Come here. Like, get in here.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I'm
we'll
with you.
protect you.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was, yeah.
It was just like this, like, finally, like, the solidarity is just no with no other person that has really kind of come across yet.
Yeah.
No understanding. And
Yeah.
it's like, then she goes in, and I think she's, back to your nugget. There's a whole bunch of other people in the house too, and
one of my favorite horror movie tropes is characters in a horror movie watching horror movies. I don't know what it is. It makes me so happy. So
so meta.
Yeah. So she walks into this house, and they're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they're the original, and they're at the very end where the girl's all bloodied in the back of the car, like driving away. And I think even one of the characters is like, do you want to watch it? Like, he's about to like get God or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was perfect in the sense, like, I found it, where I do struggle a little bit is normally it's a very old movie and it's like some obscure scene, but I think they picked that scene with a purpose.
Yeah.
Because it was a little bit of this dialogue of like, this woman in real life is being brutalized, and you have walked into a house where this group of people is watching a movie about a woman being brutalized.
Yeah, and laughing at the screen about it too. And it's like, no, she doesn't want to watch that. Like, again, leave her alone.
Read the room a little bit.
Read the room. Just turn it off. Put on fucking Bluey or something. I don't know.
Let's all just sit in silence.
Yeah, that would be preferable. Yeah. But so she gets she finally gets some shoes, and she's able to
but a nugget though, she gets some nice ass shoes.
Oh yeah,
I'm laughing at the fact this poor woman has been struggling to find clothes, shoes, anything at all. Her ex-boyfriend has these shoes in like a box.
Yeah,
like
a glass box.
Yeah, like a
nice
box. A box that he is clearly like wants people to look at them. And she's like, oh, I'll take these. I'm like, the white shoes. Yeah. That's a bold choice for the night you're having, but okay.
And he's like, nice pick. It is towards, and she's also picking out a sweatsuit. So this is the only instance where she is able to pick out her clothes.
Make choices.
Yeah, make choices for what she wants to wear. And she wears something very practical, and she wears like runners and a sweatsuit.
Yep.
And she's not put it in this ridiculous nightgown.
Yep.
She doesn't have to wear this modest but not too modest trench coat dress kind of thing that she has to wear to make sure that she doesn't come across as too sexual. She gets to wear what she wants to wear.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so powerful. I think just the choices that they made in the outfits for Cherie throughout the movie is just really interesting. Adds another layer to it.
Yeah. Interesting. So this is where we get Trey leave the house, which again, it's probably written in as a plot device, but like, she tells Trey, I need pads, or I need tampons.
Yeah.
Well, what about Dawn or like the 3 other girls there? There has to be tampons in that house.
Right. That's a good point. But
again, a
really
plot device.
A plot
he
device.
has to leave for then things to transpire.
Later.
But
I did like, so, you know, Trey is a dickhead.
Yes.
We hate him. But there is that small moment where he shows like a little bit of like compassion. Just a little bit. And he's like, yeah, I'll get you tampons, pads, whatever. Like, I've done it before. Like, all this stuff, right? And then he clears face. He's like, this isn't your fault. And then he leaves. So you get that little nugget of like him being nice.
I know.
And then
it's yes, they sprinkled that in there, but I was like, you're still a fucking dickhead.
Yeah, you're still
you picked her up and chose to talk to her about how all of the decisions she made throughout the night to make that happen. So.
Yeah, that's true.
But yes, they do try to make him like a decent guy.
They tried to give him a little bit of a redemption arc because it does not end up well for him.
So she's in a room. One of the guys walks in.
Yes.
And she asked for a tarot card.
A tarot reading. What did you make of the tarot scene? Because I thought it was so interesting.
So again, it's a plot device,
right?
Because they get on the topic of do you go to church, and then we end up in a church later. So it's very much a plot device. But where the
cards that she drew, by the way, for her future, for the night of, because the question she asks is, am I going to die tonight? The cards that she gets are death, the tower, and the devil. And I'm like, that sucks. That's a shit draw.
In my notes, I literally said, really bold choice asking for the tarot card reading.
Oh, yeah.
Would not have been on my list of things to do when trying to escape this monster with how the evening had gone already. Yes. I know where I'm headed. I don't need someone with a fucking tarot deck throwing that in my face. I can tell you that much.
That's a good point. So that was kind of an interesting, like, I don't know if it was like a transitionary scene or something, but no, it was for plot.
He basically pulls the cards. He sees the cards. He knows what the cards are saying and goes, have you still been going to church? And she's like, no, not really. And he was like, well, you need to fucking start.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. But
then we get a doorbell, one of those.
Yeah.
And
it's homeboy.
It's homeboy. It's Ethan. He's back. He found her.
Yeah.
And then we get this great scene of Dawn and Dawn's friends.
Yeah.
Rallying because she calls through the door and asks, what do you want? And then he's like, I'm here for Cherie. And she's like, oh no, that is not happening. And then she rallies her friends, and one of them has a baseball bat, the other one has a katana, the other one has a
variety of things.
Yeah, Dawn has a gun, and they are all there and they ready to go. And then and she turns to Cherie and she's like, let me do this for you. Which, again, that kind of solidarity is just like, finally, you know, like.
But then it doesn't.
It doesn't go very well. No, they do their best, but again, this is a monster of unearthly power or whatever.
So again, kind of an interesting way it's shot, though, because
she pops downstairs and she goes back upstairs to hide with the tarot card reader, who is implied to be like a teenager or something. He's doing his homework or
God love
all that
him.
stuff. Man. I know, right? And so they're hiding in a bathtub. There's shotgun shells going through the wall. You hear all this violence. You hear thumps and screams, and then it is silent. But again, you're not witnessing this kind of explicit violence on screen.
Yeah.
So this cast of kind of this little motley crew, they get their cool moment of like being able to stand and to look cool holding a katana, which I think is cool because you don't, even though they still die, you're not because again, all of this whole cast of characters, these are all people of color.
Yeah.
And you do see their bodies like bleeding on the floor and stuff, but you don't witness their actual massacre.
Yeah.
Which I think again is a very like kind of pointed
and
thing.
Even the shots of the aftermath are not.
It's not
glamorized, I'll say. Like, it's just kind of like, I felt like it was kind of like a quick, like...
Yeah, it's not exploitative.
Yeah.
But then there's Ethan, and there's music playing, and then we get this weird, gross scene where he's pulling her in to dance. And it's very unsettling, and it gave me a very similar vibe, a similar ick to when in Jennifer's Body, when they were singing to her before they murdered her.
Yeah.
That was it's just that mocking, that kind of like, that demonstration of like, I'm the one with the power in this situation, and this is how I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it to mock you. Awful.
I feel like our main actress wears her tension very well.
Oh my god.
So
phenomenal.
Like in a lot of these uber creepy, dirty, I'll say dirty just in the like, he's a gross man that's doing all of this shit.
Yeah.
You can like her shoulders kind of,
her face.
Yeah,
like
she because she doesn't have a lot of lines in these scenes, but you definitely know how uncomfortable she is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's props to her for being able to exude that physically from her.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think I wanted to say at the beginning, is just how much of a phenomenal actress she is. I mean, I think a lot of the acting just across the board is very on point. Yeah. Like both her and Ethan are very good.
Yes.
In their roles.
Ethan plays gross well.
Oh yeah, his smile is like, his like feral kind of freaky smile is just like something else.
I have had this thought for movies like this. So like, if he has a wife, how do you watch your husband play that role,
right,
and not
like
question everything?
Yeah. I think
I think I would fucking struggle. But I mean, I don't know. I guess they all do it. You will watch them have sex with someone on camera as well.
Yeah,
so,
and I think that like, that's just like kind of part of it. And I think it's also kind of like, I think about the same kind of critique that is levied against, you hear this a lot right now with Terrifier 3 coming out, levied against horror movie watchers, is like, how can you watch that? Yeah. How can you do that? How can you make that kind of thing? Where it's just like, it's a artistic separation, you know, between like the art you make doesn't reflect who you are as like a person, you know.
Look, I think it just proves that it's a good thing I'm married to a nurse and not an actress, because I would be like,
you'd be like, what are we doing?
I'd be like, come again? What just happened?
Yeah.
Anyway,
very fair.
All right, so we have the creepy dancing scene.
And then
Trey returns home. Dickhead returns home.
Trey comes home.
And for me, it was that scene of like, as a woman, you look at a man and you're like, don't do it. Like, I know that you want to step in, right?
Yeah.
Just because my thought was, he is the father of her child.
Yeah.
And if she's thinking, I might not make it through this night, you need that man to get in that car so your child has at least a parent left at the end of the night.
I didn't even think of that.
That's where my brain went. And again, she's just kind of like physically standing next to Ethan, very very uncomfortable,
invisible distress even still. And he's still kind of giving her the side eye of like, what is this?
And
that's like, what do you think this is?
Who do you think this is?
Jesus.
But like,
Christ.
I kind of wanted her to explicitly be like, Trey, just get in the car.
Yeah.
I wish that would have been that line. Like, Trey, just get in the car.
Yeah, that would have been a good line, I think. And then he could have said no, but at least she could have been like, we have a daughter to think about. And, you know, I think it's funny because at this point, I think I had forgotten that there was a kid involved, which is why that never occurred to me. Like, oh, yeah, this is the father of your child. Yeah. You need to stick around, right? So I think that kind of goes back into, like, yeah, she's a mother, but it just doesn't, I mean, I'm not a parent, so maybe it just doesn't track in my head very well.
Yeah. And then the first scene of horrific violence we get is Ethan literally ripping the head off of Trey, the black man.
Yes. Yeah. And I have a big question in my head of like, why did they show that in particular?
Yeah.
Because there was very like, you know, draw away, pan away kind of things for everything, but Trey gets Like, you see his head in this awful grimace that was really kind of haunting to me to see. And again, it is this explicit violence against a black man by a white man. So maybe there's something to be said about that they were trying to do there. But that's a question that I haven't been able to answer, of why particularly it was Trey's death that was the on-screen death. It was an interesting choice.
I think, again, the racial aspect of that definitely makes it a bit deeper. The surface level of me, like, I would love to get myself a horror movie where the only violence you witness is against men.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would have loved to have, like, a cut frame of when he's downstairs murdering everyone, only seeing the men dying.
So that would have been...
That would rub me the right way. I would be down for that.
And then that would kind of add some, like, fullness into what they're doing. It wouldn't leave me with this question of, like, why specifically is Trey's death the one being depicted? Right? So then we get the third run on the screen. And Cherie turns and she books it. And now she has shoes. She's
ready. She's in her tracksuit. She's ready to go.
And she runs. And then I'll let you talk about the scene, because it's pretty great. I think that in this act, this is where she's kind of getting more ideas. She's kind of figuring out that she has to do more than just run. She knows what she's up against. She knows what she has to do. And I think that this is when it kind of pans a little bit from just terror and fear to rage.
Yes, correct.
Which I love.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to touch on this a little bit later when she gets into the club situation, but this is the beginning of kind of that apex scene in a horror movie of our damsel in distress is becoming our final girl. She's running. Okay, there is a scene. She is coming across a bridge. She's on a bridge over a freeway. Okay, she looks up. Homeboy's in front of her, so she's thinking, "Fuck, now what?" Random for me? Random because he gets ran over by a car
randomly,
and I'm like,
"What?
Never seen that one before." But again,
it was great.
It kind of goes to that trope of, like, the hunter hunting and always being safe and always just lurking in the distance, and then bam, ran over by a car. So
thank you.
So he's on the ground, and again, I think it's a bit of a plot device because he's in front of her. She has nowhere to go. He gets ran over. She has a minute to think. She looks down at the freeway, sticks her hand in her pants, removes the tampon, and throws it into the bed of a truck going down the freeway. Caitlin, when I say my head just exploded when I was watching this for the first time. We were down here in the basement, and God bless my wife, she was watching with me. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, that's incredible.
It's so good.
That is something.
It's so good. It's
something I've never seen in a movie and will never see again in a movie.
It's fearless. You know, it is fearless not only on the part of, like, Cherie, but it's fearless on the part of, like, the creators who are depicting that. Because, like, we've had this kind of, like, this idea that that her period is kind of is to her detriment right now. Because it is, like, she's bleeding, he can smell her blood, she's, like, free bleeding on herself as she's running through the streets at night, and then finally we get this moment of being able to use this to her advantage,
because then she has essentially then, like, hid in part of, like, the fencing. You see him sit up, and you can tell he kind of goes, he's
scent in the air,
kind of catches the scent and then walks in the wrong direction.
And then it pans.
But I love movies, though, because I think if you, like, think of the logistics of throwing a tampon through the air onto a freeway, probably not going to go that way. But we love that it got written in and they made it happen.
And then you get the pan of as it had been foreshadowed before, church. And then we get this church scene.
I'm gonna let you handle this one because I struggled a little bit with the church scene.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because I liked the church scene. So she comes into the church scene. Yeah. She runs into this church, and I think she has this. Well, kind of harkening back to the tarot reading, there is a reading of like the devil, right? And so she comes in and she's looking for a cross. She's looking for holy water, and this priest is being like, "Oh, well, I like." Kind of giving her the same like offhanded distance of like, oh, you're being crazy right now. Like, do you want to? Two of my favorite lines happened in this scene because he calls her. I think he calls her sweetheart again, or he calls her some kind of like little
term of endearment.
Term of endearment there. And then she turns to him and she goes, "My name is Cherie, and I am dying." Yeah. And like the power of that, and she's in this church, and she's just like, I'm claiming my name back. I'm telling you what's happening to me. And then he goes, he's still kind of like gaslighting her a little bit and just being like, he's like, do you want to confess your sins? And she goes, "My sins? Fuck that." Yeah. And I'm like, yes, that's amazing. It's so good. And so they're in this church, and it's this weird kind of red lighting, but it switches to Ethan finds her again. Yeah. Maybe because she's free bleeding again, that he catches on, and he comes into the church, and it's really like the cinematography is so interesting because the red lights that had been lighting the church, it all turned green,
which I didn't clock.
Yeah, it was all green, and like just like this kind of weird neon green with him, and so there's this confrontation between the two of them. And she knows now that he is like this inhuman thing, and she's like, I think she kind of believes that maybe he's the devil or Satan. There's a scene where she throws holy water in his face, and he's cringing back and screaming, and then he starts laughing, which is like a very evil trope, but also definitely a trope that I've seen before, right? And so he gets up and he's coming, and she's like, "I don't believe in you," and he is like, "Oh, okay." And then we get to, again, it is panned in a way that it's just focusing on Cherie,
which I think this is the first scene we see pure like focused terror on her face. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I don't think so, because I think that her face is so expressive throughout the movie. True. That she's really. This is definitely, I think, where it's reached its peak. Yeah. But she's definitely like I in the cell scene. True. Her face is just very It's very terror.
This, I get, like, it was the first one. It was the first one that felt like the male gaze that you get in horror movies. That male gaze of just watching the terror on a woman's face. For some reason, this was the most poignant scene of that for me.
See, I kind of read it in a little bit of a different way, because as it's panning to her and her face is twisting in terror, right? It's this sound mixing off screen that's happening, and there's this like kind of very body horror pops and cracks and rips and stuff.
I want to know what he looks like.
See, and I think that's the big thing, is that like you don't know what he looks like, because he's turning into his true form probably. Yeah. This monster, this creature, this actual fucking beast, right? And I love actually that we don't see him, because I think it is very similar, a similar front of like, we're not meant to see that kind of violence. Yeah. We're not meant to see what this transformation is doing to his body. Yeah. We're not meant to see that. And I think that to see it like the body doing horrific things, this knowing that what we're witnessing is something that no human is supposed to see, and her witnessing that and us witnessing her witnessing that, is really powerful, because her face in this terror of like seeing this thing that no human is supposed to see, I think that was really well done, and I think it reflects in a really interesting way in that we don't see the violence, right? Because like the level of violence that's happening like off screen is something that people aren't supposed to see, you know? And I liked that kind of reflection on it. And I liked that we were given a moment to see her fear and her terror, but not in a way that it was pain being inflicted upon her.
Yeah.
It's taking it to this different level of the supernatural and seeing the supernatural thing that that is like that people aren't supposed to see.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of cool and an interesting like juxtaposition to what they were doing before.
I think it could also play a little bit to like, we don't know what the monsters look like in life.
Yes.
Like we go through
our
our experience of life, and we meet all these men and we meet all these people, and you just
don't know.
You never know what a monster is going to look like. So I think it could be a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And then also playing into this horror movie trope of like not seeing the monster, like the Jaws idea, right? Of like it's scarier if you're letting your imagination do what it's doing instead of like seeing the actual thing. I liked the church scene. I think this is kind of this act is kind of where things start to kind of bleed a little bit for me, where I'm just a little bit of like, okay, well, what are we doing?
Yeah,
because then she, the priest comes in, he comes back, and like there's a struggle. He stabs Ethan, and then he's like, go.
Yeah,
and she runs and she crawls into this thing. Priest dies, and then she's crawling through the dark, and then ends up in this underground club somehow.
Like we've fallen from the church down into the underground tunnels. Then you hear this like, and then all of a sudden it's like a nightclub.
Yeah, and
okay.
It's like, oh, okay.
Again, a plot device, whatever. We need to keep rolling.
We need to keep rolling. We need to keep things moving. But it was just like kind of a weird turn, because everything has been kind of like believable.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe that there's a secret club hiding under a church. Do I want to believe that?
Yeah.
Do I also want to go to that club? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, also, so we're in this club, and this is one of my favorite outfits that she ends up wearing. Oh my God, she looks so cool.
Like so badass. And again,
so cool.
To me, this is your apex scene where she is the final girl now. You have reached the last, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
We are now in kick-ass mode, and we are figuring out how to kill this guy.
Yeah. We're in rage. We're figuring it out.
God love her. She is in this dank, nasty bathroom and finds herself some bleach wipes and just starts scrubbing down and open wounds, and even wipes her area clean. And I'm like, on your period, just
could not
germicidal bleach down there. That's not going to play well for you after this.
But
anyway,
no, absolutely not. pH balance shot.
Yeah, shot. So she's trying to clean herself. She's like wrapped her head wound. A couple just stumble in, basically start hooking up in the bathroom, and that's how we get the outfit, because clothes get thrown over the stall, and she's like, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And again, just continued dread and tension. It's because it's like a little bit of like an army fatigue type fashion suit.
It's really interesting, but it looks so cool.
It
looks so cool. I'm a sucker for an aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it is the aesthetic.
And then she gets out onto the dance floor, and a group of guys circle her and are basically giving her shit for being in like these makeshift army fatigues. And like, we need to take it off. And then we have an awesome scene, in my opinion, because I think this is like an unwritten rule of women. Like, just this random woman comes up and it's like, oh my God, there you are.
Yeah.
Like the old, I see this random girl in a really bad situation. Yes. We're just going to act like we're besties. And then she gets her out of there.
Ferries her out with a bunch of other bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young girls.
And I think
escapes into the night.
Yeah. And it's, again, like tension and dread and tension and dread. And then you get this camaraderie of women, and you get like this second to breathe and relax. They're in the car and they're listening to music and whatever, and you're like, oh, like, we might make it. Bam, hit by a car.
Chekhov's car ride. Any car ride in a movie I do not trust. If you're in a car and you're in a movie, I just know there's going to be a terrible wreck. We're going to see it. We're going to see the car coming. It's just, it's just, I've seen too many movies to feel comfortable with characters being in a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they get into a wreck. All the girls die. And then this was like this moment that I'm sitting there realizing how much carnage that this poor woman has witnessed this entire night.
Yeah. Dead bodies everywhere.
Literally dead bodies everywhere. And lo and behold, it's Ethan again, because her head wound started bleeding again this time. And, you know, Ethan pops up and he's strolling along, and then we get, I think, probably my second favorite scene is he's, you know, about to kind of like final kill almost.
So before we get to where you're going.
Yeah.
Also, this is the first scene where he outright says, I'm just going to come for your daughter.
Oh, like, I think I missed that.
This is the first scene where he outright goes, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to find your daughter.
I'm going to raise her.
Yeah.
Which is, like, almost more sickening than if he was just going to be like, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah, which, again, I think, dread, tension. Mm-hmm. He says that, and now you've gone up another octave.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then to the favorite scene.
We get I can't quite remember exactly how it went, but we pan over, and there's a pit bull standing there, staring at Ethan.
Yep.
And as it had been established before, Ethan does not do well with dogs.
Yeah.
Ethan doesn't like dogs. I don't know what the mythology and lore is in with that.
We're probably missing something.
But so this dog comes, scares them off, this big squat mean pit bull, and then like walks up to Cherie, and Cherie's afraid, and then this dog just starts licking her face. And then I think it was really poignant to when they pan back do you see that this is a dog that has nursed before. This is a mama dog.
It's a mama dog.
I was like, oh, that's
perfect.
Is.
I love that it's a mama dog, and I love that they chose a aggressive breed.
Yes.
Like a breed that people are dumb enough to not realize they are just the sweetest little potatoes that love everyone, that people try to label them as something else. So I was like, that's perfect. And then this is like her little buddy for the rest of the movie.
It is. It's so great. And that was absolutely my favorite scene. So somehow she gets away from the car wreck, and she ends up finally finding the first lady.
Which has been kind of written across all of the missing posters, part of that mechanism. Now, so the first lady, again, we're now like rolling downhill with this biblical concept. My question was, because the first lady talks about how we're getting into Ethan, is he an angel? Is he a demon? Like, she kind of starts asking those questions. The first lady's in a bathhouse. So she walks in, we get our red lighting again. There are all of these women there, and she's talking to the first lady. I just had a very interesting connection talking about the dog and what's the lore. So Lilith is known to have dogs.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
I just thought of that.
So there is lore.
Yeah. I think the first lady's Lilith.
Okay. I believe it.
She talks about being the first angel, and Lilith was in the Garden of Eden before Eve.
Yeah. Yes.
And then Lilith told Adam to fuck right off, got booted out of the garden, and then entered Eve.
Yes.
So I bet she is Lilith now. I'm going to tell myself that with the play of the dog.
Yeah, most likely. I think she is. And that's a good connection, because I didn't know about the dog thing. That's pretty cool. So, the first lady, Lilith, is kind of running this secret society of like training up women, and like
talks about how she's going to take her blood and redistribute it down the pipes of the city, and he will smell her on every street corner. I'm like, what a fucking baddie.
It was, that was really cool. It was really cool, and it was cool to see again kind of Cherie being able to like take a breath.
Yeah.
She's somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And kind of get her feet back on the ground.
There's like a shot of women sleeping peacefully.
Yeah. Like able to sleep and be peaceful. So there's a lot kind of going on in this last few parts that to the bathhouse, because with redistributing the blood, she even talks about like
the red light and the ions in the air, like with the scent and all types of shit. But yeah, so now you kind of lose me a little bit towards this last little stretch.
I think I really just get lost with this secret society thing.
Yeah.
The whole, the biblical stuff. I think that probably it was trying to pack a lot in.
I could have done without it.
I could have too. I think it could have been done without, but it was still interesting. I think it was still interesting. I think that it was an interesting choice to have made it biblical. Yeah. Even though it was like it was referenced, like kind of sprinkled in throughout the thing. It didn't really feel like a blindside, but it still did feel a little bit like unnecessary. Yeah. Even though I do like, like biblical retellings, I think if it was more explicitly that, then I could have kind of gotten more on board with it. But it is for me when things get too big for their britches, like stories do, when they try and do too much, that's when I start to get a little bit lost, because I think that you can write and tell a really good story working with simple concepts. And this is why sometimes I have a hard time with Stephen King, is I like when he's doing like very simple stuff, like working around grief, but when he gets biblical, that's when you start to lose me. So kind of it's established that like Lilith is going to use Cherie as bait,
because she kind of plays into like, look, he's actively hunting you, you're actively bleeding, like you're kind of our best option to draw him out, and then kill him. And so we kind of work up to that. There's like there's a final confrontation between Cherie and Ethan in this weird. Before we get there, she's driving down the road, and it's her and the fucking dog in the car, and I'm like that,
and she's wearing a gi, and she just looks really cool.
And
I'm just like, this rocks.
She's going for it.
She is. I feel like that's giving us something. Like that, and it's her being able to take these kind of power stances that we're able to finally kind of be like, okay, maybe things are going to work out for Cherie, hopefully, so we get to this abandoned,
it's like there's a carousel. Yeah, it's like a theme park out towards the beach, maybe.
Yeah, and I saw the carousel, and I was thinking, I was like, Punisher, that scene, which is great, but you don't really need the carousel in the rest of it, so I don't know what was really going on there, but she, digs her fingers in her wounds and reopens everything, and she's bleeding everywhere, and she's waiting for Ethan to come, and then he does. They do something interesting in that she is, kind of easily knocked down, and then she's kind of strung up, very stigmata, she's like pinned up.
Because we're running with the Bible, and then I'm like, okay, so now she's like pinned to the cross.
Yeah. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And then there's like this moment of like, well, she's still fighting for her life, and then she kind of essentially is like, well, I want you. Yeah. And then he, in all of his, masculine delusion, is like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Rips her off the nails. Yeah. And then there's this moment where they're on the floor together, and then obviously it's a trick, and she, bashes him in the head, and there's a struggle, and they're fighting, and then she gets hold of this rock, and then instead of using the rock to bash him in the head again, she throws it in the window, and it's daylight. And that's one thing that we didn't cover. His fear, he had an alarm set in the very beginning of the movie for 5:25. And then we're like, and then I caught that, and I was like, why does he have an alarm set for 5:25? And then when they're in the car with the girls, one of them mentions, 5.
Fucker, I didn't clock that.
Oh, you did it? Oh. When they're in the car with the girls, they're like, yeah, we're gonna take you surfing, and at like 5:25, and she's like, why 5:25? And she's like, that's sunrise.
God damn it.
So
that's
he is
good. Yeah.
Yes. So he's sensitive to sunlight.
Straight over my head.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, with the sunlight, this is where I went, oh, is he a vampire?
Right.
That's where I went
Yeah.
the first time I watched it. I was like,
yeah.
wait, so are we working with a vampire? Like, what is this?
What is going? But no, so it was peppered in from the very beginning.
Just right in my face, and I fucking missed it.
Well,
anyway.
I think I missed it until I watched it a second time too, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So he sends him to sunlight. She bashes the windows open. Sunlight pours in. He's burning, and then this is when we get the last run across the screen, but this time it's in green. It's in green, which is, I guess, from his perspective.
Yeah,
because
because I did clock, she picks up the camera.
Yes.
And flips it.
Yes.
As if she's now in the monster's shoes.
She's taken control of the perspective. She's taken control of the camera, and she's like turned it around on him. It's his turn to run.
Yeah.
And that I thought was spectacular. Of her finally being able to take control of the camera, to look the camera in the face that has been following her through all of the suffering, and then point it back to the monster that has caused it all.
He's now crying.
He's crying black tears.
Yep.
They're tracking it along his bloody black trail of him crawling through on this rooftop or something through the sunlight, and then this is some of the explicit death that you get to watch him die.
Yeah.
You get to watch him burn alive.
Our girl Lilith is there. We're gonna call her Lilith.
Yeah.
It's the first lady. I'm gonna call her Lilith because I'm convinced it's Lilith.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's there, and she's like, "Thanks." Click, lighter.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
And it's just that I think was just such a phenomenal ending.
Yeah.
And it's not really the ending, but that just like her being able to take control of the camera, turn it back on him, and have us watch this violence done against him when we've been shielded from the violence up to so much of a point before, and just her being able to take that power back, I thought was great.
Yeah.
I thought it was very,
and
very
I think
good.
then we basically end with her making her way home to her baby, and everyone is safe and sound.
Yeah.
I really liked her walk home with the dog, who's her little buddy now.
Yeah, me too. And the dog just sits in the front of the house and is like, I am the guardian now.
I just love that. It's a good touch. I think on the walk home, she's walking different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like,
There's
she
the
has
power.
finally relaxed. Yeah, like, there's a level of, like, I did this. I'm safe. My baby is safe.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Again, I love the touch of the dog just sitting outside the house. Like, I got your guard.
Yeah.
I got your back. Go in there. Do what you need to do, Mom.
It's great. It's so good. Quick little tidbit
Okay.
before we wrap up. I looked up, because
you also need to tell us if you like it, because everybody knows I like it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
We also need that. But go ahead.
Okay, let me do this tidbit really quick, because I was really focused on her relationship with like other women, particularly other women of color. So I was interested because like the first lady is like notably like foreign to some degree, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? So I looked up the actress. The actress is Iranian, and then, which is an interesting choice, because that is I like in that area in Iran and stuff is where Mesopotamia is, and Mesopotamia is like supposedly where Eden was. So
we're getting into the lore.
Interesting casting choice.
I love this fucking rabbit hole. I loved this movie to begin with, but now that we're tumbling down the rabbit hole, maybe this will be one of my cult classics.
Maybe. Yeah, so that's my little tidbit there.
That was a good tidbit.
Right?
This is why she has the laptop during the she has a laptop on her lap, and she just finds us our little tidbits.
My stickers.
Yeah.
So yes, I did like it.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. I think it's very good. I liked it even more once I had a chance to go through and dig through it and like pick out all the stuff and really think about it. But I thought it was great. I thought the acting was really good. I thought I really did enjoy it. Yeah. It was good. Yeah, good. It was great. But yeah, so that's Run Sweetheart Run.
We need to dive into current obsessions.
Hit
me with what you got. How are you feeling? What are you up to nowadays?
Okay, so I haven't been up to very much, but I did come across some news that I'm very, very excited about. I've mentioned this book before on the podcast. It is called Manhunt by Gretchen Felker-Martin. Basic premise is 2 trans women hunting feral zombie men at the end of the world to survive, you know. And it is a visceral, gross, gory, tender, beautiful book. And I discovered that Lily Wachowski, who is one of the creators of The Matrix, so a very famed trans creator, is taking this on to turn it into a TV show. The same person is also taking one of my other favorite books and turning it into an animated movie. So that's what I'm obsessed about. I'm so excited.
As you should be.
I cannot wait, because they're to my two favorite things. They're the two things that really got me into the two books that really kind of got me into queer horror and allowed me to feel brave enough to be gross in my own writing.
I love that.
So I'm so excited to see what they're going to look like on screen.
Yeah.
And if I mispronounced Wachowski, I'm so sorry. But she's phenomenal. we love them so much. Yeah. What are you obsessed with? What are we?
My current obsession is two of my main shows just being absolutely tragic and just ripping me wide open this week. I finished Interview with a Vampire. I obviously have to stay spoilers free because you're on your path. We have a lot of people that are still on their path with that show. The ending of season 2 was just like, it was a little bit of like, even fucking vampires can't like have a nice life.
Yeah. No,
I'll just put it that way. I don't want to give anything away, but it was like that moment of like, even a fucking vampire can't just have happiness.
Yeah. No.
500 years to just like come crashing down. And then my other show from season 3 is actively playing right now. And I don't want to give anything away, but again, it was a little bit of something happens at the very end of season 2. And you're like, oh, like this is going to develop this. Mm-hmm. And then bam, just hammer comes down and you're like,
smash.
No.
Yeah.
So that's my current obsession, is my shows just absolutely
like ripping her heart
and then
out.
Lastly, us going to see Terrifier 3.
Yes. Awesome.
It's going to be incredible.
It is going to be great.
No doubt are going to talk about it next episode.
Absolutely. Because that's the
I was going to talk to you off mic. I might have to make a separate. I might have to go on a little bit of a Terrifier rant on our page.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
just a little nugget.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be so fun.
Some additional content for you guys.
Yeah, some bonus content. We should keep that for the Patreon.
Oh yeah,
we haven't talked about yet, but you know, whatever.
We'll get there one day.
Podcast,
just like we're gonna have merch one day.
Yeah.
What are we doing next episode?
Next episode, we are doing. I saw the TV Glow, and it's a little bit of a vibe shift.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to talk about it. I'm really excited to give it another couple more watches.
Yeah. It's a lot to absorb. So I would say if you haven't seen it, definitely make sure you've watched it at least once.
Yes.
I think it's definitely one that the more you watch it, the more it's probably going to resonate with you.
Definitely.
And I think, I mean, I love the fact it's not really my brand of horror, so I didn't watch it at first. And then God bless, my sister-in-law texted me and was like, when it originally came out, and was like, have you seen it? And I was like, no. And she literally said, it is going to be a queer cult classic. And I was like, say less. So I'm obviously going to go watch it now. Yes. So I bought it. I think
I bought it too.
Yeah. So,
we're really excited to talk about it. But I think that is it for this week.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, again, for your support and for listening and just being awesome. And thank you, Lisa, for being such a great co-host.
Thank you, Kale, for being awesome.
All right.
We will see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.